Welcome, everyone. Ready to jump into something interesting.
Always.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into how cash assistance is changing the game in humanitarian aid.
Yeah, it's a really dynamic field.
We're looking at the latest reports, some really cutting-edge stuff, even a white paper about, get this, blockchain and humanitarian aid.
Which is not something you hear every day.
Not at all. It's pretty mind-blowing stuff. You'll see why in a minute.
Yeah, what we're looking at has the potential to change things in a big way.
Okay, so first up, the State of the World's Cash 2023 report. This is from CALP, and it's basically the ultimate guide to what's happening right now with cash assistance in humanitarian work.
And one of the big takeaways is the focus on making aid about the people it's supposed to help.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Shouldn't it always be about the people?
You'd think so, but it's more than just giving out money. It's about empowering people, letting them make choices, and realizing that a lot of the time, they know what they need better than anyone.
So it's about changing how we think about aid.
Right.
It's not a top-down approach.
Exactly. And the report shows this trend of not just asking communities if they'd rather have cash or vouchers, but really getting them involved.
Oh, so like how the program is designed, all of that.
Yeah, how it's delivered, the whole 9 yards.
That's huge. But the report also points out there's still a long way to go.
Right. It's not perfect.
Some of these consultations, they're still not transparent enough. And that can be frustrating.
Totally. Imagine being asked for your opinion and then not even knowing if it was considered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's got to be frustrating.
Yeah.
Okay, so get this. The report talks about this weird paradox.
Paradox. I like where this is going.
More and more people around the world are getting cash assistance, which is great, but satisfaction with vouchers is really low.
You'd think people would just be happy to get help, but I guess it's not that simple.
Exactly. So the report dug into why people are unhappy, and often it comes down to things like bad treatment from vendors who accept the vouchers.
Yeah, or worries about vouchers just not being worth as much as cash.
It's like we need to look at the whole system, not just getting the aid out there.
Totally. We need to understand how people actually experience using the aid.
Now, the report also talks about a big trend, moving towards aid being more locally led.
Makes sense, right. Local organizations are closer to the problems. They understand the culture better.
Yeah, seems obvious. So why isn't it happening more often?
Well, the report says a big problem is funding. International donors. They still like giving money to big international groups.
Even when local groups would be better.
Sometimes, yeah, it's like they're stuck in their ways.
Wow, that's a shame.
It's frustrating. And it's not just about the money.
What else is there?
These local groups often don't have enough people or resources.
You mean like staff and stuff?
Exactly. High staff turnover, even simple things like not having enough admin support. It's
Well,
like we're asking them to do more with less.
that's not really fair, is it?
Not really. And what's interesting, this frustration with funding and how slow everything is, you see it with both local and international groups.
So it's a systemic problem then, not just a one-off thing.
Exactly. And this is where things get exciting. The report points to something that could really shake things up.
Are you talking about digital technology?
You read my mind. Yeah, digital technology, and that's where this other paper we've got comes in.
The Machu Picchu one?
That's the one. And it's kind of radical, actually.
Oh, how so?
Well, they're saying we should be using blockchain technology and smart contracts, like the stuff from crypto, but for distributing aid.
Hold on, blockchain.
Yeah.
Like for humanitarian aid, seriously. That sounds a little out there, you know?
I know, right? Like something out of a movie. But hear me out, because the ways they're talking about using it are actually really practical. Imagine, like, every transaction is tracked, everything's transparent, and super secure. We could get rid of all those slow, expensive, outdated systems we were complaining about.
Okay, now I'm interested. But let's be real for a sec. We're talking about people in crisis situations, often in really remote places. How would they even use this stuff?
That's the cool part. They're saying we could use something as simple as SMS messaging, texting.
Wait, really?
Yeah. Most people, even in really remote areas, have a basic phone.
I guess it's true. Wow, that would be huge. We were just talking about all the problems with funding and bottlenecks. Could blockchain actually fix that?
That's what the Machu Picchu people are saying. They're saying these smart contracts, which are basically contracts that enforce themselves automatically on the blockchain, could automate a lot of the aid process. No more human error, no more waiting around, and we could use the money way more efficiently.
Okay, now I'm seeing it. But can you give me an example? Like, how would a smart contract even work with humanitarian aid?
Okay, so picture this. There's a smart contract setup, right? And it automatically releases funds to a local organization, but only when they've done what they're supposed to do.
Like prove they delivered the aid.
Exactly. Like, say, they delivered medicine to a community. Once that's confirmed, boom, the money is released immediately, no waiting weeks or months for things to go through a million different offices.
That's amazing. It would cut out so much bureaucracy. And let's be honest, maybe even some corruption too, right?
You got it. And get this, because blockchain transactions are all out in the open, every single step is recorded and can be checked.
So it'd be much harder to get away with anything shady.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability. Built right in.
Okay, I'm sold. This technology could be huge for humanitarian work. But let's get back to the State of the World's Cash report. They pointed out some other big challenges, like how funding isn't always distributed fairly.
Totally, and that's a major issue the report brings up. So UN agencies, they get a lot of the money for cash assistance programs, right? But a lot of the time, it's actually NGOs, the groups on the ground, that are actually getting that aid to the people who need it.
That seems kind of backwards. Shouldn't we be funding the groups who are actually doing the most direct work?
You'd think, right. But the report found that there are all these different funding streams, and NGOs, they end up getting a lot of their money through these bigger organizations.
So it's like a chain of funding, from one group to the next.
Yeah, it's called downstream funding. And to be honest, a lot of it isn't very transparent. It's almost impossible to track where all the money is going.
Like a black box of funding. How can we even know if it's actually being used effectively?
Exactly. And that leads to another big issue the report talks about: data responsibility.
Oh, right. With more digital payments and everything, that's got to be a concern.
Huge concern. We're talking about people's personal information, and we need to make sure that's protected, especially since they're often in really vulnerable situations.
Absolutely. It's about more than just preventing fraud. It's about respecting people.
100%. The report emphasizes having clear rules and guidelines for how we manage data in these cash assistance programs. It's about doing things the right way, ethically and responsibly, every step of the way.
So we've got blockchain, we've got mobile tech, smart contracts. It's like a tech revolution in the humanitarian world.
It really is, and wait till you hear this. The report dives into this other cool trend: multi-purpose cash assistance. MPC, they call it.
MPC. All right, break that down for me. How's it different from regular cash assistance?
Okay, so usually cash assistance is really specific, like this money's for food, this is for shelter, and so on. But with MTC, it's way more flexible. People can use the cash for whatever they need most. It's up to them.
It's about giving people choices
Right.
by letting them decide what's best for themselves.
Exactly. It all goes back to that idea of dignity and respecting people's choices.
It makes perfect sense. So why isn't everyone doing this MPC thing already?
Good question. It's becoming more popular, but the report mentions a few roadblocks. One of the big ones is that there aren't enough good needs assessments being done.
Needs assessments.
Yeah, we need a better way to figure out what people need across the board, not just in one specific area like healthcare or education. To do MPC right, we need to look at the whole picture.
So it's about connecting the dots, understanding how all these different needs are related.
Right. The report is really pushing for a more holistic approach to humanitarian aid in general, you know. We need to break down the walls between different sectors like healthcare and livelihoods and work together more.
Yeah, it makes you wonder why those walls were ever there in the first place.
It's complicated, often goes back to how things were always done, the funding models. But the good news is that people are starting to realize we need to change.
Definitely. So if we can pull off this integrated approach, what does that mean for cash assistance?
One area where it could make a huge difference is financial inclusion.
That's something I'm really interested in. A lot of times we see cash assistance as a short-term solution, right? But what if it could help people become more financially stable in the long run?
Exactly. The report looks at how cash assistance can help people get access to bank accounts, savings programs, even microloans. It's about giving them the tools to not just survive, but actually build a better future for themselves and their families.
That's amazing. But let's be real. Is that even possible in places where there aren't banks or reliable financial systems? I mean, we're talking about reaching the people who need help the most, and they're often in the toughest situations.
You're right, those are real barriers. Things like not having access to technology, not understanding how finances work, even just not trusting the system. The report acknowledges those challenges. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
So what can we do about it? How do we bridge that gap?
One promising solution the report talks about is Village Savings and Loan Associations, VSLAs they're called. They've been really successful in helping people access financial services, especially in places where banks aren't an option.
I've heard of VSLAs, but refresh my memory. How do they actually work?
So basically, it's a group of people, right? They pool their money together, even if it's just a little bit, and then they give each other small loans with low interest rates. The best part, they don't need banks. They rely on the community to support itself.
So it's like building a culture of saving and lending from the ground up, people helping people.
Exactly. And the report found that linking VSLAs with cash assistance programs can be really powerful. Like, imagine using those cash transfers we talked about to help these VSLA groups grow.
Give them the boost they need to lend more money, invest in their communities, all of that.
Exactly. It's about moving past just giving immediate relief and towards creating solutions that last. It really is. It really makes you think about the human impact of all of this.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in all the technical stuff, but at the end of the day, it's about people.
Absolutely. And that leads to another really important part of the State of the World's Cash Report, the part about cash assistance and climate change.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a big one. Climate change is everywhere, and it's only going to become more important in humanitarian work, don't you think?
Definitely. The report actually has a whole section on it.
Really?
Yeah, they're saying we really need to start thinking about climate change in every part of humanitarian aid.
Which makes sense, because climate change, it's not just a standalone problem, is it? It makes everything else worse, right? Like all those vulnerabilities that were already there, climate change just makes them even worse.
Exactly. It's like a threat multiplier. And the report really stresses that we can't just keep doing things the old way. We need a totally new approach, something that's less about reacting after something bad happens and more about being proactive, thinking long term.
So how does cash assistance fit into all of this? How can giving people money help with climate change, especially for communities that are already feeling the effects?
That's the million-dollar question. So imagine a community dealing with drought, which is becoming more common. Cash assistance could help farmers there invest in crops that can survive with less water or more efficient irrigation systems.
So it's about giving people the means to adapt, right?
Hmm.
To bounce back from climate disasters, which sadly seem to be happening more often.
Exactly. And it's not just about immediate relief. It's about empowering communities to come up with their own ways of dealing with these changes, to become more resilient.
Because there's no one solution for everyone, right? Every community has its own unique challenges.
Exactly. And this is where anticipatory action comes in, something else the report talks about.
I've heard that term before, but to be honest, I'm not entirely sure I understand it.
It's pretty new, but it's gaining a lot of traction in the humanitarian field. Basically, it's about using forecasts and early warning systems to get aid to people before a disaster even happens.
So we're talking about predicting things like storms or droughts and then stepping in to help before things get really bad.
Exactly. It's about being proactive rather than reactive, and cash assistance can be really effective here. Imagine a cyclone is about to hit a coastal area. We can transfer cash to vulnerable families beforehand so they can buy supplies, reinforce their homes, maybe even evacuate.
It's about giving people the power to protect themselves, not just reacting after the fact.
Precisely. And it's often cheaper and more efficient than waiting for a disaster to happen and then trying to pick up the pieces.
This is all fascinating. So we've talked about how cash can help communities adapt to climate change, how it can empower them to act, and how it can be used for this anticipatory action. But let's be real. There have to be some downsides, right? What are the potential problems with using cash assistance in this way?
You're absolutely right. Nothing's perfect, and the report acknowledges that. One of the biggest concerns is making sure that cash assistance programs themselves are good for the environment.
Oh, interesting. We don't always think about that, do we? Like, what's the environmental cost of the aid itself?
We should. And traditionally, humanitarian aid hasn't been very green. Think about all the shipping and logistics involved. That's a huge carbon footprint.
So you're saying that cash assistance, by its nature, can be more environmentally friendly.
It can be. Sending money electronically is definitely better for the planet than shipping tons of stuff around the world. Plus, when people can choose what they need, they often buy locally, which also helps the environment.
It's about moving away from that top-down approach and towards something that's more sustainable and locally driven.
Exactly. But it's not always straightforward. One thing the report points out is that it's actually pretty hard to measure the environmental impact of these cash programs.
So we need better data to know for sure.
We do. We need to look at the evidence, not just make assumptions. Otherwise, we could be doing more harm than good without even realizing it.
Makes sense. And it highlights how important transparency is. It's not just about how the money is spent, but also the environmental impact of those decisions.
100%. And here's another layer of complexity. When people get cash, they get to choose how to use it, right, in those choices. They might not always be the most environmentally friendly.
That's true. Just because we think something's a good idea doesn't mean everyone else will.
Exactly. We can't control people's choices, and we shouldn't try to. It's about finding that balance between respecting people's freedom to choose and encouraging them to be responsible.
It's complicated, that's for sure.
It really is. But these are the conversations we need to be having. Climate change is changing everything, and the old ways of doing things, they might not cut it anymore.
That's where innovation comes in, right?
Absolutely. And that's why I think the State of the World's Cash report is so important. It gets people thinking, it sparks debate, it pushes us to find better solutions.
And we need that more than ever, right? This isn't just an academic exercise. These are real problems affecting real people, and their lives depend on us getting this right.
Absolutely. This report, it's a call to action for everyone involved in humanitarian aid.
And it's a call we can't afford to ignore. We've given you the information, the trends, the challenges, and the potential of cash assistance. Now it's time to decide what role you'll play in shaping the future. Until our next deep dive, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep pushing for a better world.